If you've been going around the good old internet looking for the right podcast to fulfill your New York Yankees needs, well, I'll be the first to deliver the good news to you. You have found it. Here on Yapping Yankees with me, your host, Mike Scudero, you and I will be discussing the latest news, takes, and talk throughout the entire Yankee universe. Oh, and there may be some ranting on my behalf. Yeah. Anyway, what do you say we get to it? Let's get to yapping! Well, hello there, my fellow Yankee fans, and welcome to episode 229 of the Yapping Yankees podcast. As always, I am your host, Mike Scudero, your friendly neighborhood Yankee yapper with the best yap in all the land, here on August 4th, 2024, with yet another extra large order for you of the Yappuccino, one that I am very glad to give you today after waiting for hours, I tell you, for this game today to finally come to an end, for the rain delay to come to an end, and for the Yankees hopefully grabbing a victory to secure their third straight series victory, which is something they haven't done in a long time, and that they did. The Yankees finished an incredible game against the Blue Jays in the Bronx here on Sunday evening. At the time I'm recording right now, the game literally just ended about 10 minutes ago. So if you're wondering where my enthusiasm is coming from, it's from that, because I'm still riding high on that. It is fresh, and we are amped the hell up right now. Yeah, clap it up. I gotta tell you though, man, all the suspense with the rain, waiting on the rain delay to finally end, and how torrentially it came down. Even if you do not live in New York like myself, I'm sure you saw it when you were watching the Yes Network, or maybe you've just heard of how bad it was, but my God, did you see how that rain was coming down? Even made its way out here to Long Island, where I'm at. And it was torrential, as it has had the tendency to be for days now. Like it has been for a couple of summers now, mostly on the weekends, which is highly irritating. But I tell you, with the severe torrential humidity downpours, gotta tell you, I missed the part where I moved to Florida. I'm not really sure where all this came from, and I'm not sure why it happens every single year now here in New York. I mean, keep on hearing from friends of mine and some family members I have down in Florida about the severity of the thunderstorms and how humid it is down there and how insufferable it is down there at times. And I gotta tell you, New York's climate has mirrored that in many ways for plenty days. Nice little rhyme there. But I missed the part where I moved to Florida. Enough with the rain, huh? I mean, you're not kidding. I mean, good Lord, every single day. I mean, I even just tweeted this before, but if I had a nickel for every time this summer, and even last summer, especially on the weekends, if I had a nickel for every day throughout the entire season of summer, that it was sunny, nothing but sunny, from the start of the day to the end of the day, I'd probably have a nickel. Because you just can't dodge the rain these days here. My God, it's annoying. But hey, rain today took the Yankees out of commission for a while. And then it led to what was an epic victory after an awesome shutdown top of the 10th by Mark Leiter Jr., who was one of the trade deadline acquisitions for the Yankees this past week. We will get to that later in Yankees news. Do not worry about it. And then followed by a walk-off by none other, I'm sure. If you haven't kept much track of the Yankees this past week and you only heard me on last week's episode, then you're going to be surprised to hear this, but Mr. DJ LeMahieu, of all people that you could pull out of your rear end to predict having walked it off for the Yankees. Yeah, I know him. It's unbelievable. Get to that as well. But as of today's awesome victory against the Blue Jays, the Yankees have now won 7 of their last 8. The last time I spoke to you, last Sunday, the Yankees and Red Sox game was almost over. The Yankees were winning convincingly, and they would end up sealing the deal in Boston last Sunday and winning the first of the previous 3 series that just wrapped up this past week, tacking on one more run thanks to Jazz Chisholm once again, and sealing the deal at 8-2. And that was their first series victory since the All-Star break, and only the second series victory in the prior month and a half since the Kansas City series, where they almost swept the Royals. Oh my gosh, how many weeks were we talking about how the Yankees could not get out of their own way and how if a gun were to their head, they could not win a series? Well, fortunately, the Yankees finally saw an end to that once again against the Red Sox and have done it 3 times in a row since then, including what nobody expected, a sweep in Philadelphia. We're going to get to all of this. It has been a great past week of Yankees baseball. For the first time in a solid month and a half, I'm able to come on to this show and start by saying that, and damn it, does it feel good. Oh my gosh. 7 of their last 8, though. Again, 3rd series win in a row, back to their consecutive series winning ways that they could not get enough of from late April until they started to downfall in the middle part of June, give or take. It was also today, their walk-off at home today in the bottom of the 10th. It was their first home walk-off since May 3rd. That was my brother's birthday. With Rizzo against the Detroit Tigers at the stadium 3 months ago, almost to the day. They have not had an easy time at home. And this is actually the first time I'm mentioning it on the show, but I mentioned it on Twitter a few times, including once again today. Because even with today's victory, it is a point to mention that the Yankees have actually been significantly better on the road than at home, which is usually not the thing with them. They usually do very well in the Bronx. This year, that hasn't been the case, so that makes it even more refreshing to see the win that they got today. But even with today's victory, the Yankees are still just 29-24 at home. Overall, they are now still, especially as of their winning this past week, they're now back to over 20 games over 500, 21 to be exact. And they're only 5 games over 500 at home. They've struggled at home. They have not had an easy time at home. On the road, on the contrary, they are 38-22. So out of 60 games on the road, they've won nearly 40 of them. They've done very well. But they were just 28-24 at home coming into today's game, now 5 games over 500 after today's walk-off. So they've struggled at home, and they had not had a walk-off there for the past over 3 months. Usually the Yankees stack up a pretty decent amount of walk-offs year in and year out. Not this year. So especially seeing this today has been a rarity for 2024, and a welcomed rarity at that. So it's been very fun between how they ended up sealing the deal the last time we spoke, what has been going on this past week, how many times they have won, how many series they have been able to win, every single one since the last time we spoke, in fact, and what has happened within the games in that time span. Today they only scored 4 runs, so this breaks the streak for that. But prior to today, coming into today, they had scored 5+ runs in 8 straight games coming into today. After Monday's win in Philadelphia, and I had even tweeted this after that win, going back to the first game in Boston, even that one that they tragically lost, and it was not a great way to pick things up last weekend to start off that series at Fenway Park, where they have not had an easy time against the Red Sox at all this year so far, before last weekend's series, because the rest would go very well, as we spoke about last week, but especially at Fenway. And Friday was not a good start to that. But even including that game, if you count from Friday all the way through to after Monday's game, those 4 games last weekend to the early part of this past week, in those 4 days, the Yankees scored 40 runs. Coming into today, since then, I think they'd scored 66, I counted. That's ridiculous. I mean, I know that even throughout their slumping times, more often than not, it was the pitching that was the reason that would bury them early or maybe blow a game late. I know it was mostly the pitching that was the reason for their struggles a great deal of the time, a great amount of the time. But the offense certainly had their days where they would not back the pitching up. They were just not on the same page, not gelling a lot of the time. Sometimes the hitting would be great and the pitching wouldn't, and vice versa. Sometimes they would both suck. Sometimes the hitting did play a part in their losing, but a chunk of it was the pitching, be it the bullpen or the starting rotation. They both had their awful days. But this is still pretty awesome what the offense has managed to accomplish in this past week. They have scored a dumb amount of runs. And that just tells you right there everything they've done. As far as what has actually happened within the lineup, we've been talking about each individual player for weeks now, and how they've been going down, 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 down. Well, actually, this week now, I can report quite the opposite with a few guys. Why don't we start with the man who they have moved back to leadoff more often than not as of this past week, and he has seen a bit of a resurgence. He's slowed down a little bit in the last couple of days alone in his last couple of games, but otherwise, overall, within the last week, we've seen a bit of a resurgence from him in Alex Verdugo. He did take an 0 for 5 yesterday, so that didn't help. But before that, he was 8 for 26, now 8 for his last 31, which is good for a 258 average, which was obviously higher before yesterday's 0 for 5. But yeah, we've seen even a little bit of a resurgence from him as of late. He had the day off today, and Judge was in left. And we saw a little bit of a complication with that in left center field, I should say, when Trent was coming in to get a ball, and Judge and him kind of crossed paths, one behind the other, and it caused Trent to make an error. But nonetheless, just one day, and the Yankees ended up winning anyway, so no harm, no foul, I suppose. Even though it came close to having harm, but it did not. But Verdugo has seen a bit of a resurgence of late at the plate, and he's gotten some more looks in the leadoff spot once again, because, again, the Yankees don't really have too much of a leadoff hitter this year. But despite his 0 for 5 in yesterday's game, you hope that Verdugo can continue on a better track. He also took an 0 for 5 the night prior, so he was 0 for 10 in the last 2 days, so back to slumping again, I guess. But before that, this past week, my overall point is this past week overall how guys did. And Verdugo in the last week and a half prior to the last 2 games was seeing a bit of a resurgence. That much is true. So you hope he gets back to that after being 0 for 10 in the last 2 games. Yankees have an off day tomorrow. Probably see him back on Tuesday against the Angels, so we see how he does after that once he's back in the lineup. Soto and Judge are Soto and Judge. We don't have to talk about them anymore. We know what the deal is. Soto continues to do an amazing job, still batting .310 after today's 2 for 3, one of them being a go-ahead home run in the bottom of the 7th after the Yankees tied the game with some small ball in the prior inning in the top of the 6th, so that was awesome to see. Had a little bit of a scare when he slid into second in the later innings, but he ended up being okay. So that is all good. Happened at the bottom of the 8th, I believe. But he's been doing very well still. That was his 28th home run of the year that he had also hit, by the way. So he's closing in on 30 already at the start of August, which is just crazy. You want to talk about home run totals? How about Judgy? He's at 41 now, and the Blue Jays at this point just refused to even pitch to him. Intentionally walked him 3 times today as he went 1 for 2. Batting average up to .322. OPS up to 1157. Oh my gosh. 41 homers, 103 RBIs. I mean, even the other numbers. The on-base percentage is .456. And the slugging, even on August 4th, is .701. It's over 700.
Holy crap!
Yeah, that can be said with just about everything involving Aaron Judge. There are plenty of people in baseball with OPSs lower than that. There are people who would have been fine with signing up for an entire season's worth of what Judge's numbers are right now, with 2 months, give or take, still left to play. They would have been okay with signing up with an entire season's worth of those numbers. 41 home runs, 103 RBIs, and everything else. Oh my God, they would say, I'm good with that for a whole season. Are you kidding me? It's unbelievable. Then you have Austin Wells. He had some moments, especially at the end of the game against Chad Green towards the end where he popped out, unfortunately. But my guy continues to look better and better the more at-bats he gets. What was I saying last week while live reacting in real time with the Yankees-Red Sox game on Sunday night last week? Just keep on getting the kid more at-bats and more looks. He's gotten plenty of time out there in Trevino's absence. Even some surprising time. Even had some day-after-night appearances, which usually doesn't happen too much with catchers in nowadays game. But what was basically an even split down the middle between he and Trevino when Trevino was still playing, now he's getting an overwhelming amount of the time out there, and you've seen it turn for the better. I mean, in the last 15 games, last couple of weeks, he's batting .321. Even in the last week, in his last 7 games, 9 for his last 30, which is good for a .300 average. looking really good. So just keep on getting him the looks. He's been fine behind the plate, too, for the most part, so just keep on getting Austin out there. He's just going to keep getting better and better the more at-bats you give him. Even his OPS is now eclipsed 750. Keep on climbing that up towards 800. That's even better. Batting average creeping towards 250 after how brutal it was when he was getting his inconsistent looks. Just keep on letting him get those looks. Stanton had a rough day today, came up in a lot of huge situations. A lot of huge situations. Before the rain delay, he had already left 8 men on base. Alone. Because it seemed like in any big situation that happened for the vast majority of today, Stanton found himself up at the plate. Just didn't seem to be seeing the ball too well. And other than that last game in Philly, when he had a few hits, he's still just getting back into the swing of things. That much is obvious. So, and we all know that happens when Stanton first comes back, so it is what it is. Jazz Chisholm, I mean, what can you say? He made history with his home runs. First guy to hit 4 home runs in his first 3 games in New York in franchise history. Unbelievable. One of them was off a position player. Yeah, absolutely. And it was with Aaron Judge's bat, too, which is freaking awesome. But it's still cool. It's still a first out of anybody in the history of the franchise. And there have been a lot of greats to play in the history of the Yankees. So it's nothing that you can just scoff at or write off. It's pretty freaking cool. And other than some pop-ups down in foul territory, where he's looked a little bit uncomfortable at times, he has looked a lot smoother than I expected him to look at third base, especially considering in the last week is the first few times he has ever played third base at the professional level. So considering that, I'll take a couple of plays looking just a little uncomfortable. If, for the most part, it is smooth, and he has looked very smooth down there. So that's very encouraging. He seems to be thrilled to be here. Talking about after having been from the Bahamas, especially when you're in those countries, you see a lot of the big teams in each sport. A lot of them are talked about for the most part, so he always knew about the Yankees, and it was always a dream in the back of his mind to play here ever since he was a little kid. And you can tell that he's telling the truth because of the energy and the drive and the motivation and the fun that he has had since arriving here. So that has been amazing to watch on Jazz's behalf, and I hope to see it continue. He brings a good attitude here. So, by all means, continue on. Even Trent Grisham, I mean, yeah, he had that drop ball today that resulted in the tie to begin with and resulted in all the drama and everything. But hey, got the Yankees their first walk-off in 3 months, so it all worked out. But he has been very interesting of late because he's continued, aside from the drop ball today, obviously. You saw this continue in Philadelphia for the most part, but although this doesn't surprise us because he's a 2-time Gold Glove winner in the past, he continues to be unbelievable in the outfield, making great plays in huge spots especially. That's really when he lets it shine out there. And also just in big spots at the plate, he'll just flash his occasional power at times. And it's baffling because you know that's the truth because his OPS is just under 700, even though his average isn't even 200. Usually, if your average is that low, you're not producing all that much at all, unless you're just pure power like Trent has chosen to be, because he just has the pop and the extra base hits, whether it be the doubles, the home runs especially, and that boosts up through the slugging, the OPS. But he'll come through with these occasional surges of power. He just ropes one, like he did in yesterday's game. And the funny part is that he doesn't always really even follow through on his swings. He doesn't do the full follow-through, yet the ball still just shoots out. So he must be pretty friggin' strong. But he'll just rope them sometimes. Big into the extra base hits for sure. That would explain why, despite a 189 average, his OPS is floating around 675. Whereas a lot of people with those numbers, their OPS would probably barely be in the 500s. So, Trent's definitely an interesting ball player. Definitely has his big moments, that's for sure. Anthony Volpe, this is the one I wanted to hit on. Last couple of weeks, you know I've been hard on this kid. Because I know what he's capable of. We all know what he was capable of. And all the things that the Yankees put a stop to because of their belief in this kid. He's very important when it comes to what they plan and hope to do. So eyes are on him a lot of the time. I know expectations on a kid are always tough. I know that. But between the boneheaded things he has done defensively at times and big moments for the most part, and the fact of how for the past 2.5 months or so, ever since he started off the season in a sick way, looking like he was planning on being a top player in the game, let alone shortstop in general, but Then he just decided that, especially after being put in the leadoff spot, it started off pretty well there for the first couple of weeks, but then after that, bro just decided to revert back to everything that doesn't work. He became an impatient hitter, had really boneheaded swing decisions, went back to the one-handed swing, stopped stealing bases and taking walks, and even was making bad mistakes in the field in big spots. Makes his great plays plenty, don't get me wrong, but he just decided to take massive steps back and regress. But of late, whether it be moving him in the lineup or whether it be reverting back to the stuff that does work that made him a smart hitter and a smart overall player earlier on in the season, he seems to have rediscovered it all. He's gone back to making better swing decisions. He has gone back to swinging at the pitches he knows he can handle. He has gone back to the two-handed swing and follow-through. When he's getting on base again, he's being aggressive once again. A lot of the traits that makes Anthony Volpe a threatening baseball player. One that should be your typical leadoff hitter because of his style of play and his attributes. I guess it just didn't fit him, though. At least not for now. Maybe once again in the future, if you try once more. Who the hell knows what the future holds? But nonetheless, him being a huge part of the success they hope to achieve, it is very important that I am gladly here to report today that ever since the All-Star break, Anthony Volpe has been phenomenal. His numbers were down, I believe, in the low 250s, high 240s as far as average. In the last week and a half or so alone, it is now over 260 once again. His power and pop has returned somewhat, going deep a couple of times, driving in more runs, heading up towards 50 RBIs. His OPS has gone up once again to be well over 700. The stolen bases are there now being at 20 already. So you just hope it continues in this direction, but it has been awesome of late. In the last week alone, in his last 7 games, he is 12 for his last 31. That's good for a 387 average. Even in the last 15 games, leading up to the All-Star break, and since then, 23 for his last 64. Good for a 359 average. So in the last 2 weeks or so, give or take, Anthony Volpe has kicked ass. And as far as this Yankee team is concerned with what they hope to achieve, they will need Anthony Volpe to be a respectable baseball player in order to do it. And you see the value in it when it comes to them winning, and he is doing well again. They are synonymous with each other. They have to happen together. So this is a big deal that Anthony Volpe has reverted back to what works. What worked at the beginning of the year, when he was hitting and playing overall out of his mind. He's got to keep this up. Has to. And even DJ, since the last game in Philadelphia, when he decided to single-handedly lead the Yankees to victory against the Phillies on the road, even he's been a little bit better the last few days. Don't know how long that'll last. It would be lovely if it did. But even just in the last 7 games alone, he's 3 for his last 12. Hasn't gotten too much playing time the last few days, this past week overall. He's been on the bench a lot more often. But in that last game in Philly on Wednesday, and now today once again, he's done some pretty cool things. So that's definitely a good thing. And I have been very, very hard on DJ. I think you would be hypocritical if you said you weren't doing the exact same thing, because every single Yankee fan was saying the same thing as me, so I don't want to have any hypocrisy out there. I am full on admitting, as I believe you should too, that, and listen, if you weren't, and you were believing in him this whole time, regardless of how brutal it got, then hey, more power to you. But you have to admit, even if you're a big DJ guy, that for over 2 months now, you've probably never seen someone look more cooked than him. It's just a statistical fact. It's not even a matter of opinion. Just trying to rationalize what I was saying a little bit. And I still stand by it. I mean, a couple of good games, yeah, it's great. Helped lead the Yankees to victory in a couple of games they probably otherwise would not have won without him. But it doesn't change what's happened the last 2.5 months, 99% of the time. But I have been very, very hard on DJ. Have been. Very, very hard. So I probably don't even have the right to say this, but I'll say it anyway. I'm happy for him that he walked off the game today, and good for him. It must feel like the weight of the world has come off his shoulders between today and Wednesday, because I know how hard it's been on him. Doesn't change the fact how cooked he's been and how much of a problem it has been for the Yankees continuously running him out there, despite there being no signs of any sort of life whatsoever prior to this past Wednesday. In the last 2.5 months, or 2 months and a week, give or take. But good for him. Not going to be mad at it. Still plays for the Yankees. Of course I'm happy for him. So just good for him. And I don't have to tell you that if DJ decided to resurge, no words can be said to properly describe and articulate how huge that would be for the Yankees. So we'll see how that continues. That definitely has my attention. Waldo's gotten a bit less of playing time of late, but when he's been out there, he's done his thing very nicely. And Gleyber, well, he had 2 hits today. He did, in his 2-for-5 effort. Still want Burrow off my team. Still don't want him here. As a matter of fact, that's what I was really hoping for at the deadline. As we know, I was really hoping for Yandy Diaz to be acquired because he's mainly first and third base. You could have moved Jazz Chisholm to second base, which is where his primary position is, and you could have had Diaz down at third base. But they didn't do that, obviously. If DJ decided to resurge, and obviously you could put him back at third base now, or even put Waldo there. Jazz has looked good at third, not to diminish that at all. But I'm just saying, second base is his primary position, and I'm not that big a fan of playing guys out of their primary positions, as we know. Especially after all the nightmarish experimenting that's gone on in left field for years now. And even occasionally on the infield. The Yankees have had a tendency to do that for years now, playing guys out of position. So I'm just not that big of a fan of it, even if it occasionally has worked. Occasionally. Not too often. But the point of what I'm trying to make is that I really still want Gleyber off the team, especially after the other day, where he roped that hit to left field, didn't run it out at all, because he thought it was a homer, got caught looking, got caught lacking, and not really sure if he could have gotten a double out of it to begin with, but it is still the effort and the hustle and the motivation that counts. And what made it even worse was a double was hit after that, and he did not come home to score on it when he possibly could have been at second. You never know. And the fact that he is still as slow as he has always been, even at his young age, and I did tweet this a couple of days ago as well, is still unbelievable and just straight baffling to me. It's just unbelievable how slow he continues to be. And factored in with that when, hey, it could have been a run if he possibly made it to second, if he was running hard from jump, who knows. But Boone finally made an example of him and benched his ass for the rest of the game, which I couldn't be happier about because that's not usually something that managers do too much overall nowadays, but especially the Yankees. So I had to give props, even though I'm not a Boone guy, made that very clear for years now. I had to give him props for doing that because it was the right thing to do. And it sent a good message to everybody else as well. What I've been screaming about for years. There's one aspect of the game that you can control. Out of all the bizarre factors and aspects of baseball that you can't, there's one thing that you can control, and that is your effort, your hustle, your motivation. That all comes from within. And if you need that checked, then you need to have happened what Boone had happen with Gleyber on Friday. And it was a good message. And the more people that continue to do that, it should happen to them too. I've seen Verdugo not hustling down to first plenty of times. For months now. And if he gets caught lacking on a ball that maybe he thinks is gone and he's not hustling, maybe it should happen to him too. Or any other guys that don't hustle. Just blatantly, especially in a big spot. And I know Boone said, oh, certain guys are going through certain things at times. You don't know the story. And he's not wrong about that. But you can still control it. You're still out there. You're playing for the New York Yankees in a Major League Baseball game. Maybe in something that's obviously an out. You don't have to break it out of the box every single time. But you should still at least put a little effort into it. Because you're still being paid, very handsomely, might I add, to play professional baseball for the New York Yankees. At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. But in general, you're in the professionals. Play hard. And because of that, and because in general how Gleyber has been throughout the vast majority of this year, except for maybe 2 or 3 very short-term outbursts of offensive production. With the exception of those, he has been, for the most part, as we know, absolutely and utterly brutal. He showed a little bit of a surge again in the last 2 weeks at certain points, going 16 for his last 60. That's good for a 267 average. And last week hasn't been too good again. 6 for his last 27. It's okay. He's batting 222 in that time span. That's what that's good for. So he's got to just, I don't know. I don't know why he's still here. I'm not a fan of his. I don't think I ever will be at this point going forward. Obviously, when it comes to the Yankees, I want him to produce because I want the Yankees to win. But on a personal level, I'm just not a fan of Gleyber's. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to the Gleyber fans out there, whoever of them might still exist out there, but I just don't like the guy. I don't like his work ethic. I don't like the lack of example that he leads by. And I think he's awful in just about every aspect. I just don't think he's a good baseball player. He doesn't have good baseball IQ at all. There's no awareness in real time. The offense, while good in spurts occasionally, is not nearly enough to compensate for all of the rest that absolutely sucks. He's not good at fielding. He's not good at base running. I just don't like the kid. Sorry. I've wanted him off the team for months now. Months. That's just how I've always felt about him. But I don't want to turn what should be positive into a negative. That's just an individual analysis on Gleyber Torres. But as far as the rest of the lineup, it has been going very well for the past week or so, as we well know. Starting rotation has still shown a bit of a tendency to go up and down a bit at times. We'll get to that more in weekly recap. Bullpen's been a bit better as of late, which is always good to see. And all of that leads up to what we have been giving as far as the accolades for this past week, how the Yankees have managed to do in this past week of Yankees baseball, heading into a nice off day tomorrow on another Monday. Plenty of off days for the Yankees of late, which only makes sense because of the way their first half schedule was. How many times do we remember them playing well over a dozen consecutive days in a row and just like no rest and just burning the team out, especially the pitching and the bullpen, and it was just a disaster. So you had to know eventually in the schedule that would ease up, particularly in the second half, and you've seen a lot of that for weeks now. The Yankees having quite a bit of off-day opportunities on a Thursday or a Monday. And now overall, as far as opponents, their August schedule overall is easing up as well. Angels and Rangers are both up next, and they face the White Sox and the Tigers after that, I believe. I believe their only tough series in August is probably the Guardians, who they play in the middle of the month, if I'm not mistaken. Otherwise, the rest of August is easy. It's easy. And the Yankees even handle Cleveland well when they usually play them, so I'm not all that even worried about that. And even despite how brutal, before about a week to a week and a half ago, how brutal it was from then all the way going back to since pretty much the Red Sox series at Fenway Park, when they started to go downhill, when Verdugo started to just turn for the worse and everything went downhill. In that time span, I've mentioned that there was all the opportunity in the world for the Orioles to completely take control of the division. Yet here we stand after both the Yankees and the Orioles have completed play here on Sunday, August the 4th, and they are in a deadlock tie for first place, with the Red Sox being fairly comfortably, 6.5 games behind both of us at this point, when at one point they got to within 3 or 3.5, when at one point way earlier on we were 14 games over them. So when they got that close as they did before, to say the least, a little too close for comfort. But I was saying for a while, this division could have gone one of two ways, but it is unbelievably settled here. The Yankees, if they even played even half-decent baseball, not even saying at the level as they were in the first 2.5 months when they were playing out of their minds, by far the best team in the entire league, just half-decent baseball. If they had played half-decent baseball, they could have been over in this division by about 5 to 7 games, I would say, at this point in time, with how badly the Orioles have also played for the most part for a month and a half now. But conversely, the Orioles, with how brutally the Yankees have played, very well could have also themselves taken solid control of this division, but they also have not because they have not played the best of baseball themselves. So because of that, they have now ended up with things here heading into August 5th in a deadlock tie, both having 67 and 46 records, only a game worse because they have 2 less losses than the Guardians for the best record in the American League once again, as the Yankees had possession of for months earlier on in the year, and they're very close to getting that once again here. It's pretty unbelievable to think about when you think about how bad things got for the Yankees, how brutal things were, that they still find themselves here. I guess that's the benefit of starting the season the way they did, throughout the first 60 to 70 or so games, give or take. But it's unbelievable with how all the ways the division could have turned out, it has turned out this way. All of the extremes that could have taken place if the slightest of things changed or just went differently on certain given days. It's pretty funny. And what's also pretty funny and ironic, I do want to say this too, when the Yankees began their downturn in mid-June, it was at Fenway Park that really began. People will say it started with the Dodgers series. No, it didn't, because after the Dodgers, they went to Kansas City and defeated the Royals 3 out of 4 in Kansas City directly after the Dodgers series, and damn well nearly even swept them, if not for Clay Holmes blowing it at the end. It wasn't until the series at Fenway. After that series, it actually started off good with a big, I believe it was an 8-1 victory, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to go right back to that right now just to double check myself on that. Yeah, it was 8-1, exactly. And then the next 2 had gone very poorly, and that's when the downfall began, as of June 15th, right in the middle of the month. And now I was thinking, going back to Fenway Park last weekend, with the way that went, the complete reversal. The first game going badly and the next 2 going very well. Completely on the flip side of the first visit to Fenway Park. Let that be the start of the turnaround in a positive way. And that's exactly what's happened in the last week. I mean, it's very ironic, but that first visit to Fenway Park was the start of their downturn, and it seems like their next visit to Fenway Park last weekend was the start of their upturn. It's just a little interesting observation there on my behalf that I thought maybe you would like to hear about, in case you didn't think about it already yourself. Little very interesting little tidbit of information there. So hopefully that could end up being the big turnaround, because ever since then, once again, it has been fun in Yankee land. Even if the trade deadline wasn't too fascinating and too eventful, or not eventful enough for some, it's still been good in Yankee land for the last week and a half. Can't say otherwise. Even mentioned the starting rotation having their good and bad. I mean, Cole looked good, bouncing back again today, thank God, limiting the damage in that second inning. Luis Gil still continuing to look pretty good once again. Carlos Rodon even. I mean, my God. Last week's start in Boston, I was over here after he was starting to look like he was getting ready to give that game back once again, as he had the tendency to do with so many games in the last 2 months, give or take. I was calling him a bum once again. Well, he locked in for the rest of that start, as we spoke about last week, and then in his last outing once again, looked good for the 3rd time in a row. So even he has started to tick back up a little bit. The ones that you're concerned about, on the flip side, for the most part, are Nestor and especially Marcus Stroman, who, as of his disastrous start on Friday in Marcus's case, in his last 10 starts or so heading up to a dozen starts, which is almost a third of a season for a starting pitcher, he has had 1 quality outing. And for those who don't know, a quality outing is defined as 6 innings and 3 runs or less. Earned runs, I should say. In his last near dozen outings, he's only had that happen 1 time. And Friday was a bad one. So you got to figure it out with Marcus Stroman. We'll talk about that a bit later on, even more so. But you got to figure it out with Marcus. And Nestor, he just doesn't go deep enough into games. Has these odd struggles where he'll be good the first time through the order sometimes. Then he'll be bad the second time, and then sometimes good the 3rd time through if he even makes it that far. Doesn't go deep enough in. very inconsistent. A little bit consistent of late. Last 2 or 3 outings, consistently bad. But those are the real only couple of worries. But then you have some positivity going forward after that with Clark Schmidt hopefully not being too far off. So, again, positives and negatives, a little bit of a mixed bag with the starting rotation. Bullpen's been a bit better of late, but things have been heading on a better track for the Yankees overall, guys, and just hope that it continues. Because, again, as I said, especially considering the August schedule, it gets a bit easier. Just keep it rolling. As of today as well, they also won the season series, I believe, against the Blue Jays head-to-head. Not that the Blue Jays really look like they're going much of anywhere this year, in another underwhelming season for them once again here. But the Yankees have not had an easy time against their American League Eastern opponents, as we've also spoken about at great length. So to be able to take a season series against any of the fellow AL East opponents is still a very nice thing. So you very much take the series victory this weekend because of that. And before the last week, there's series winning struggles. So you take it because of that as well. And because, as we also spoke about earlier, they have not had an easy time at home. So a lot of positives to take away from today, my friends. A lot of them. And that's the overall general consensus as of this past week. And we just ask ourselves, are they back again?
Give me a hell yeah!
Stone Cold thinks so. They very well could be. We'll see how they continue going forward, even in this next week. But before even thinking about next week, we still got more of this past week to talk about, my friends, especially when it comes to news. So let's get right to that. We go back to last Monday, the 29th, starting right away with the news. As expected, the Yankees finally having reactivated Stanton as expected. Because I believe last Saturday or Sunday, and we did talk about it last week, that's the point being, that they had officially said they would reactivate him on Monday, so that was to be expected. And in the meantime, they had DFA'd Jahmai Jones, which is something that we have been waiting for a long time, as a lot of us remain baffled as to what he was still doing on this roster. So Jahmai Jones, even though he has since been outrighted to AAA, important fact being that nonetheless he is just no longer on the 40-man roster. That's the most important part. Finally, the DFAing took place amidst Stanton being reactivated, which, again, very happy about, including Stanton being back. Even if it takes him every now and again when he misses this kind of time with injury, some time to get back into the swing of things, still just good to have that name penciled back into the lineup. But no deadline news on Monday. Tuesday comes around, July the 30th, and of course this was the day of the deadline. The day started off with the Yankees announcing that they had actually released infielder Jeter Downs, as he had signed with the SoftBank Hawks in Japan. So it was cool to have a guy named Jeter in the Yankee system. It was. We've spoken about that a lot of the time for the last year or so, give or take, since the Yankees had brought him into the organization. But as they say at this point, signing in Japan, a place that I love a lot and can't wait to go to. Get ready to learn Japanese, buddy. And that he shall learn to do. So Jeter Downs to Japan. And also on this day, Garrett Cole was scratched from his start due to, as I had said, some sort of general fatigue. Perhaps even a stomach bug, I heard some people saying as well. So just missed the start and then really didn't ramp up in time or sufficiently enough in order to prepare for his next outing, so he just skipped one time through the rotation. When I had originally heard that he was missing it, I was at work and didn't get to look at the specific details or reasoning as to why he was missing the start, so my heart dropped to my big toe when I read that on my phone that Cole was scratched from his outing. But when I heard this, I was a bit more relieved, especially when they had confirmed that he would be making his next start on Sunday against the Blue Jays, which he did today, as I had mentioned earlier. So, again, no harm, no foul, I suppose, but my breath was being held there for a bit. So, Will Warren did get the start from on Tuesday night instead when he was supposed to throw in Philadelphia, and expectedly got optioned again after the game. And speaking of optioning, Yoendrys Gomez was also optioned back down to AAA again before the game too. Ron Marinaccio was called back up on Wednesday in order to fill that empty roster spot on the 26th-man before being optioned once again right after Wednesday. So lots of roster action. That's my point. In the middle part of the week, a lot of roster action going on. to compensate for Cole missing a start, Yoendrys Gomez going down, Ron Marinaccio filling the spot, then being optioned again. So a lot of roster action. Some of that having to do with the deadline as well, with their new acquisitions, obviously. So a lot of things going on with the roster to also compensate for that as well. Speaking of the deadline, what ended up happening later on to add on to the news of them having acquired Jazz Chisholm last weekend, which of course we already talked about last Sunday because the move had happened before that already. A couple of days before that, as a matter of fact. So, don't have to talk about Jazz again, aside from what we mentioned at the beginning of the show. It's him still having a very fun time here so far. What ended up happening for the remainder of the time for the Yankees for the rest of the deadline from after we spoke last Sunday up until the deadline on Tuesday, nothing was happening right up towards the end. But then it was announced that the Yankees had acquired Mark Leiter Jr. from the Chicago Cubs. So the Yankees doing some bullpen dealings with the Cubs again, like the deadline 2 years ago with Scott Efros. So dealing with the bullpen once again with them. And the return is infielder Ben Cowles, more of a utility infield type, and also right-hand reliever Jack Neely, who I actually like upon looking into him further. But turns out they both needed to be added to the 40-man roster come December to protect them from the Rule 5 draft. So I guess the Yankees decided to get ahead of that and use that as reasoning to be proactive and get some relief help with those risks of being unprotected existing. And they're not wrong in that case, so use them to get more relief help. And Leiter Jr. has turned out to be not only be a big help so far, but turns out to be what they need because he is a higher strikeout guy. We've been talking about for weeks how the Yankees need a higher strikeout bullpen guy because they simply have too many guys who pitch to contact. And in order to squeeze out of a lot of big, tough situations, you need strikeout guys to help with the mix out there. And you saw that with Leiter Jr. once again in today's game, as I had mentioned earlier on in the show, in the top of the 10th of the Ghost Runner situation, where you could use a strikeout guy. Leiter Jr. is described to be that, and his numbers backed that up even when the Yankees had first acquired him. And you saw that take form once again this afternoon, where he got a couple of strikeouts in a row to strand the runners on base and not allow any scoring to take place in the top half of the 10th this afternoon. And you saw him do that also in some moments in Philadelphia even. And also the kid does not let the moment get to him. He stays very reserved, very relaxed, no matter how much pressure is on him. And that is a trait that you want in a big moment, high leverage relief pitcher who inherits a lot of jams, maybe even works into them himself and then has to squeeze out of them. That's a trait that you like out of them. So a couple of very good aspects about him. Also, if the name sounds familiar to you, then you are not wrong at all, because obviously we know, for the most part, the last name Leiter from Al Leiter. Well, it turns out Al Leiter, in case you don't already know this, is Mark Leiter Jr.'s uncle. And since Mark Leiter Jr. is a junior, I'm sure you can imagine that this is the child of Al's brother, Mark. So that's the relation there. So if you thought the last name was familiar, if you don't know who Al Leiter is for some reason, you should know who that is. Big-time pitcher. But in case that just rang a bell for you, well, then you are correct. That is his nephew. So it's pretty cool to have him here. Cool to have a high strikeout guy in the bullpen finally, and it has really shown the positives in the last bunch of days since they acquired him from the Cubs. And it's funny because the first looks that he had in big moments in Philadelphia where he came in, especially in that first game in extras, and he was pitching to Austin Wells, who he hadn't even met yet. And Austin Wells didn't even know what he threw. And he's pitching to him. They introduced themselves to each other in the dugout after they escaped trouble following the jam. Can you imagine having to do that? Like, hey, I just pitched you in a huge moment after not having met you prior, but it's great to meet you, man. I found that to be very funny. I don't know. But maybe I just have a strange sense of humor. But that's basically what happened. So that's awesome to see. But you've seen him put into these high leverage situations already, and he just gets it done. He gets it done. So he's proven to be a pretty efficient arm already. Glad he's here. I'm sure he'll have his tough days. Everybody does. But we see how promising that he can be in those big moments. That's what you want. Yankees need those higher leverage back end of the bullpen, high strikeout guys. And if he can prove to be one of those, then good. I didn't have a problem with the pickup originally at all. Also, another thing I didn't have a problem with whatsoever, as I'm sure you can imagine, because of all the bitching I've done about him, is that Caleb Ferguson was also traded to the Astros in exchange for a minor leaguer, right-handed pitcher, Kelly Austin, to be exact, and international pool money. That international money striking again. The Yankees absolutely love doing that. And they have acquired some solid talent through the international signing, so I don't blame them for that. But you know that I certainly have no issue whatsoever, mostly with the fact that Caleb Ferguson is no longer in the bullpen. Holy mother of pearl, did I never think I would see this day come. Oh my gosh, I don't mean to be over the top rude, but God, he couldn't get off this team fast enough. I am sorry. He just could not get out of here fast enough. No issue with that at all, as I'm sure you can imagine. But that's all good and whatnot. And then the Yankees also acquired one more reliever by the name of Enyel De Los Santos. That's the other bullpen addition they made, another strikeout guy like Leiter Jr. And he's also come into a couple of big moments as well himself. He did again in the ninth inning, I believe it was in today's game, and worked himself a clean inning. I'm not quite sure he'll provide quite the boost that they expect Leiter Jr. to on top of what he has already done, but hopefully he provides at least a bit of a mild boost. That's what you hope for. But honestly, other than that, as far as the Yankees were concerned, and we ran down the whole list of everything else that happened around the league last week. Don't have to go through that more once again, but a few more moves did trickle in between Sunday and Tuesday around the rest of the league. But other than that, as far as the Yankees are concerned, guys, nothing else happened. It was quiet. And I do have a little bit of an issue with the rest of that, with the lack of everything else. But at the same time, the market, especially for the pitching, was just out of control. Out of control what teams were asking. I mean, between the fleecing in the Kikuchi trade, that alone, let alone all the others, I mean, that was the fleecing of the century, I think. The outrageous demands that certain organizations had for pitchers who at best were mid. Like, I don't know. So it's just weird. And people did partially blame this on the expanded playoffs. And I actually tend to agree with them. And the reason that I actually agree with them, if you'll indulge me for a second, is the third wild card. While it may be a big plus for a lot of other small market teams that don't make the playoffs and have a chance of contention too often, while it may be a positive to them to give them an opportunity to make sort of a magical run like the Diamondbacks did last year, while some other teams have had the opportunity to do it through the wild card in the last few years. We've seen it on a number of occasions. So while some people may see it as a positive because of that, it could also very well be seen as a negative, which is what I tend to see it as a little bit more of, is that it encourages mediocrity. Because introducing a third wild card allowed a team to sneak into the playoffs with even less wins than before. We saw teams sneak into the playoffs since this third wild card has been introduced with as little as 83 wins. That is barely a record over 500. And yet they were rewarded with a playoff spot. Now, a bit of an indictment on the rest of the league for not also achieving something like 83 wins as well. Like, oh, they did it. They deserve it then. But the third wild card does encourage a degree of mediocrity, and thereby might not encourage teams as much to go out there and make moves. They say, oh, I think we got enough to get by and get 84, 85 wins, maybe even 83 at times, and that should be enough to sneak into the playoffs and go on a magical run, because we all know that a great deal of the playoffs depends on just how hot a team gets at the right time. So that encourages teams to not try as hard as they otherwise perhaps would have in the past to get better and try to win more games so they could get that playoff spot when there weren't as many wild cards. And I'm inclined to agree with that line of thinking. And that also causes the organizations that do have something to give away and perhaps should be selling more than they have this year or in prior deadlines with this third wild card, it inclines them to drive up their prices and requirements for certain players irrationally, and holding on to players that serve them no benefit when they have no plans of contending now or perhaps even in the immediate future. And that also hurts things because then other teams who are buying can't necessarily improve the way that they would like to. Not to break out the small violin for those teams or make excuses for why the Yankees might not have done as much as they otherwise could have, but that's the truth. It does encourage a degree of mediocrity, and perhaps encourages teams to not try as hard as they otherwise would have in the past with less wild cards, where it required more wins to get to the playoffs. Before, teams felt the need to win probably about anywhere between 88 and 90 wins in order to guarantee themselves at least a playoff spot through the first, or after the second wild card was introduced, maybe even in the second wild card. Mostly 90 wins. That was a big benchmark, I remember. Big threshold. But now with this, I hear some people talking about how some teams say, oh, that'll get us 83, 84 wins, and that can get us a third wild card. And whether or not you like the third wild card, you have to admit that that line of thinking to a certain degree sucks. It sucks. Teams who are right on the cusp of competing, and they can make a few moves to get better, and other teams selling that should sell even more, who don't have plans to compete now or even in the immediate future, there should be encouragement and motivation throughout the entire league to win as many games as possible. Not win just enough to sneak in through the third wild card through like 83 wins. You may not agree with me, and that's fine. You're perfectly entitled to your opinion. But I think that that line of thinking is weak and dumb. I mean, maybe not so much dumb because that is the reality of things now, that you can get into the playoffs through 83 or 84 wins. I'm just commenting on the negatives that the third wild card brings about and the fact that I don't like them. And I do think that that has had an effect on the deadline the last couple of years, and I think we've seen that. There were more players that could have been moved here. All around the league, not even just for the Yankees, all around the league, especially in the pitchers market. And the ones who were moved, the fleecing, the outrageous requirements and asks, my God. I think that that has been a massive reason, if not the reason, for why this has happened the last couple of deadlines. It's my opinion. I could be wrong. But otherwise, that's what happened for the Yankees, basically, guys. And we'll talk more about the deadline come the social media segment. But I'll say right now, just to get my opinion out of the way, I do like the acquisitions the Yankees did make. I said last weekend that I think Jazz Chisholm was a good acquisition, as long as that was the start of it. That did obviously end up being the only infield move. So, but even on its own right, Jazz is a good pickup. It's a solid pickup. The guy's very versatile. He has shown the ability to be very open with playing other positions, unlike some others, Gleyber Torres. But he has shown the willingness to play other positions wherever the Yankees and however the Yankees have to have him do so. He has shown an energy that the Yankees were in dire need of. And he's had some pretty damn big moments at the plate already here. So you like to have a guy like that. And the bullpen guys, solid pickups. I don't have a problem with the Leiter Jr. pickup. I like the fact that they acquired a high strikeout guy, especially without having to give away much too many pieces at all. The same thing with De Los Santos. I think that could be another on the down low, sneaky, solid arm for the bullpen, another higher strikeout guy. I don't have a problem with those moves in particular. But were there bigger names out there? Yes. Were the expectations for them maybe a bit too much and the Yankees would have gotten fleeced? Also, yes. This is both sides of that coin. But also there's the line of thinking. You have Juan Soto possibly only for this year, despite what many of us think of him coming back or not coming back after this year. Regardless of that, as long as it is not official, there is still at least the remote possibility that the Yankees might lose him this winter. And he might walk away to go elsewhere. So if that is the case, it's possible you only have Juan Soto for 1 year to group up with Aaron Judge for the best 1-2 punch combination in the entire sport. Garrett Cole's back from injury. You want to go absolutely all in no matter what it costs. There is that line of thinking too that is valid. And in my opinion, did they have other holes to fill as well? I think they did. I would have liked to get Yandy Diaz ultimately with how everything ended up shaking out. I think Diaz was probably the best ultimate pickup that would have been for the Yankees. Would like to have seen Chisholm go back to second, as I said earlier on in the show, and have Diaz go over to third. Could have said goodbye to Glaber after that. And you would have had a solid, efficient hitting third baseman on the team as well. But that didn't happen. The Yankees also didn't acquire any bigger bullpen guys, as I said before. Tanner Scott, ended up joining Jason Adam in San Diego. A lot of top-tier bullpen guys going there. The Padres cleaned everything out in order to get that done. I think they traded away like 7 of their top prospects for that. So I hope that ends up being worth it for them. But Tanner Scott was not taken. Pete Fairbanks was not taken. Big name like Jack Flaherty for the starting rotation. Ended up going to the Dodgers at the last second, right around the time of the deadline. Michael Kopech went to the Dodgers as well. So a lot of the bigger names the Yankees did not get. Also, a bit of a quick side note, it did make me sick to hear that in that Jack Flaherty trade that the Dodgers had with the Tigers, that part of that trade, in order to acquire Flaherty on the Dodgers' behalf, they ended up using Trey Sweeney as a part of that, former Yankee prospect. That made me a little sick, not going to lie. But in any event, as I was saying, do I like the individual pickups for the Yankees? I do. Do I think bigger names could have been acquired to help out even more? I do. Do I think there are more holes to fill? I do. But this is where they find themselves now. It has been a good last week and a half for the first time in almost 2 whole months. I'm going to ride on that, and with the easier schedule on the rest of the way out, and hopefully the Yankees locking themselves into a solid position within the playoffs, preferably first place in the division. Hope for the best, guys. I mean, despite some arguing that we have seen this movie before, which was a major theme of last week's episode, if you recall, it's all we can do now. So you could like what they've done, admit that more possibly could have been done, but the market was also outrageous. Could there be more holes to fill? Yeah, but this is what you got now. So with the deadline, not thrilled. Yankees have had better deadlines in the past. But I'm not beyond pissed off either. Not beyond pissed off. Not at all. Just sort of in the middle. I do still tend to not like a lot of the question marks the Yankees still have. And especially if the market were not so out of control, especially with pitching, I definitely would have liked to see maybe another addition or two. But the individual additions they made, I do not have an issue with. So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know how you feel about it, but we'll definitely have a lot more time to talk about it in the social media segment in just a bit. But the only other pieces of news remaining that took place on Friday night up to now were, again, the news that Jahmai Jones was outrighted to AAA. We already spoke about that. J.D. Davis was officially released now. You remember he was DFA'd as well, but at this point he has officially been released. Thank sweet baby Jesus himself. He is done. So, J.D. Davis, gone. And Jahmai Jones still in the organization, but again, not on the 40-man. They also announced that Nick Burdi was reactivated an option to AAA, so there's another potential bullpen arm ready to go down there whenever, alongside guys like Efros, when they feel that the both of them have properly built up down there. A couple of guys who could potentially help out the bullpen. If they do need the extra help, they'll be down there in wait. And speaking of another pitcher, Cody Poteet, if you remember him, he was moved to the 60-day just in order to help open up a 40-man spot to add De Los Santos. So after all the chaos with the deadline and corresponding roster moves with that and everything else, here is the 26-man, just so we're up to date after all the chaos of this past week. Pitchers: Garrett Cole, Nestor Cortez, Jake Cousins, Enyel De Los Santos, Luis Gil, Tim Hill, Clay Holmes, Tommy Kahnle, Mark Leiter Jr., Carlos Rodon, Marcus Stroman, Michael Tonkin, Luke Weaver. Catchers, obviously with Trevino being out, you've got Austin Wells and Carlos Narvaez. Infielders, you've got Cabrera, you got Chisholm, LeMahieu, Rice, Torres, and Volpe. And in the outfield, Trent Grisham, Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, and Alex Verdugo. And the DH being Giancarlo Stanton. Hopefully at some point, when he is officially ready to go, we can add Jason Dominguez to this roster. He is definitely one of the few names, whether it be bullpen help additionally, or maybe even a little bit of starting rotation help with Clark being on the way back, or maybe even a little bit more of lineup help internally that the Yankees will be able to add in the second half. Not to sound like Brian Cashman or any of his brain trust, saying that, oh, getting these guys back are just like having deadline acquisitions. No, but they could be additional helps going forward. They could be. I'm just not going to phrase it as irritatingly as they tend to phrase things with their little isms over there. But nonetheless, that is the 26-man roster picture after all the chaos of this past week with the deadline and the corresponding roster moves and the individual moves even outside the deadline, blah, blah, blah. So what say you we move on to the weekly recap segment to talk about the awesomeness that finally was this past week of Yankees baseball. Yapping Yankees time machine. Fire it up. Alrighty, ladies and gents, boys and girls. As I said earlier on in the show, the Yankees did end up sealing the deal in the final game in the Boston series at Fenway Park during ESPN's Sunday Night Baseball last Sunday when we last spoke, when I was reacting to this game in live time. Final score of that was 8-2. They would end up taking the series in Boston 2 out of 3. Unlike the last time they were in Boston, I was saying earlier on in the show too, hopefully this marks the beginning of the upturn, whereas the prior visit to Fenway Park marked the beginning of the downturn for the Yankees. This seems to be having the opposite effect as this series went the complete other way. It's awesome. And this would continue, to the utmost of my surprise, in Philadelphia. Now, I know the Phillies have been having a tough time at it of late. I know that they have struggled for a little while now. And it even continued for them this weekend here as they just lost 2 out of 3 to the Mariners in Seattle. So they continue to really go on the downturn here. I understand that. But they were still going into that series the best team in baseball. Now they're right about there with the Guardians, Yankees, and Orioles, as well as the Dodgers being not too far behind them as well, but only .002 winning percentage points higher than the Yankees and the Orioles. So this series did allow the Yankees to really get back with them neck and neck. So they were still the best team in baseball just about heading into that series on Monday, despite them having a rough go at it for the last few weeks. So they're still not to be taken lightly, regardless of their recent struggles, especially in Philadelphia. Because those home problems that I was talking about the Yankees before, as opposed to their road success, the Phillies are basically the exact opposite. At home, even despite getting swept by the Yankees in the series this past week, they're 38-21 at home, nearly the complete flip side of the Yankees' home record. That's basically what the Yankees are, with the exception of a half a game, with their road record. And the Phillies' road record is nearly identical to the Yankees' home record. They're 28-24 on the road. So the Phillies play exceptionally well at home in Citizens Bank Park, which is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to own your home turf. And the Phillies do that. And they play well at home. So because of that, taking that into consideration, I expected the Yankees, despite the Phillies' recent struggles, to maybe win 1 out of 3. I certainly did not expect what actually ended up happening. Definitely did not. Because the home and road struggles are a factor. Like I was saying earlier on today on Twitter, it confuses me how the Yankees are so different from home to the road. It's baffling to me. I mean, I know they had their month and a half's worth of extreme struggles, but other than the potential reason of there being possibly a lot more home games than road games, which there weren't an unbelievable amount more at all of home games than road games during the Yankees' struggles, there's no real reason why the Yankees should be overwhelmingly better on the road than at home, especially when they've historically been very good at home. It's just been flipped upside down this year, but the Phillies at least do what they're supposed to do at home, which is why you couldn't take this lightly. Again, 1 out of 3 I expected. But nonetheless, the Yankees took care of business entirely. The first night was Luis Gil against Zach Wheeler. And Zach Wheeler is one of the better arms in the game this year. Even after this outing, after allowing 7 runs in just 5 innings, his ERA was still only .294, even after all those runs given up. And Luis Gil, he had been better of late, obviously, the last few starts, but still against Zach Wheeler in Citizens Bank Park against the Phillies, but they took care of it. Luis Gil, for the most part, looked very good. Did have his innings where he struggled a bit. 5 1/3, 5 hits, 3 runs. He did walk 3 guys, but he struck out 8. And he ended up getting the win on the night because the offense more than did their job. Good for his 11th win on the year. ERA still just at 3.20. As he continues to be pretty solid, Luis Gil, as we head into the month of August, where weeks ago there was concerns of his arm getting tired. And yes, at some point you still have to think about possibly limiting the innings at one point, but still, it is very encouraging to still see him being on a good path heading into August with how many pitches he's had to throw this year and how many innings he's thrown. After that start, he's about to hit 113 innings on his season. So you just hope it continues on that trend. And the offense, my God. Aaron Judge's 38th home run of the year. Jazz Chisholm's 14th and first as a Yankee. Big moment for him, put them up 2-0. Ben Rice even had a solo shot, made it 3-0 as he continued his turnaround as of the last few days at that point in time. And after the Phillies got within a run, made it 3-2, Juan Soto piled right back on, 2-run double, followed by an Austin Wells 2-run triple, scoring Verdugo and Soto. Phillies etched in one more run after that, and the Yankees made them pay once again following that. Aaron Judge, 2-run shot, his 39th of the year and second on the night. And then Anthony Volpe after that would get in on the home run power himself, bringing that pop back, 2-run shot, made it 11-4. Soto RBI double made it 12-4. And then off the position players I mentioned before, with Aaron Judge's bat, Jazz Chisholm comes to the plate. And he hits a 2-run shot, his 15th of the year, second of the night, and second as a Yankee thereby, making it 14-4. That was the final. What an incredible night for the Yankees to start things off in Philadelphia. Never would have expected it, honestly. Really, never would have expected it, especially how awesome a night it was for Jazz Chisholm in just his second night as a Yankee at that point. Tuesday would be a wild freaking night. Wild. Will Warren started this game in place of Garrett Cole. He had a rough time at the beginning, giving up 4 runs in the first 2 innings combined, but then settled down kind of nicely after that to amount to a final line of 5 1/3, 4 runs, 2 walks, and 6 strikeouts. So he bounced back pretty nicely ultimately, but struggled early. And the bullpen had to do a lot of work after that because of how long the game went on, obviously. But the offense, in what was a nice comeback by them for sure, and then some solid back and forth for the rest of the way out, obviously saw themselves on the winning side ultimately. But starting out the scoring in the top of the first on a ground out was Jazz Chisholm, made it 1-0. And then the Phillies jumped all over Will Warren in the first couple innings, made it 4-1. Then Jazz Chisholm once again hits a solo shot to make it 4-2. Yankees creep a little closer. And then, for the 4th time in the last 2 days, and the 4th time since he arrived to the Yankees for the total of the 3 days he had been there, as I said before, the first player in franchise history to do this, Jazz Chisholm went deep again to epically put the Yankees in the lead. Take a listen for yourself, why don't you?
Driven deep to right field. Did he get it? Did he get it? He got it! A 3-run home run! Jazz has done it again! And the Yankees take the lead! 5-4!
Listen to that stadium on the road. Sweet Lord. It was right down the line. I couldn't believe it. When it was off the bat, I'm like, no way, no way. And the second it landed in the seats, I just screamed at the top of my lungs. Gave the Yankees that epic late-game lead. Clay Holmes tries to come out to close it, ultimately victim of some soft contact, although I'm done making excuses for the guy. Yet another blown save for him. It seems like he's blown an infinite amount of saves in his last, I don't know, almost dozen times out there. And yet another one, thanks to a wild pitch, tied the game at 5. And then a lot of crazy back and forth action in extra innings after that. Top of the 11th, Verdugo put them back ahead in a sac fly. Bottom of the 11th, the Phillies retied it at 6. Oh my God. And then at the top of the 7th, Gleyber Torres, he flew into what would ultimately be a double play, so can't even really fully be credited for just a sac fly in itself, even though he was credited for the RBI. But it was because Jazz Chisholm tried to advance from first to second on the play and he got thrown out that it was technically flying into a double play. But nonetheless, it drove in the run from third and made it 7-6. And then Michael Tonkin in the bottom half of the inning out there once again, epically finally closes it out and ends a laborious and hard-fought game with an incredible victory. Yankees at least taking the series by winning 7-6. What a game that was. My God, I was in agony during that. And then on Wednesday, they try to go for the sweep and unbelievably actually accomplish it. Nestor Cortez was on the mound. He went 5 1/3. Only allowed 3 hits, but gave up 3 runs, 2 walks, and 6 strikeouts. Started out the game, first 3 innings not allowing a base run. I was like, who is this guy? But then 4th and 5th innings when he started to unravel a little bit, I was like, there's Nestor. So the Yankees were up 4-0 at the time. He allowed them to creep closer, make it 4-3 by the time he was done. The bullpen, with the exception of Luke Weaver having given up a run after Nestor was done, and Mark Leiter Jr. having a little bit of a tough time in the 8th inning, allowing 1 run, but then not allowing anything game-tying or worse to take place, ended up escaping trouble, thankfully. Otherwise, the bullpen, especially as far as Tommy Kahnle and Clay Holmes were concerned, did their job. To be expected of Tommy Kahnle, because as we spoke about on last week's episode, he's actually been very good for some time now, but Clay Holmes even managed to get it done after giving us all a heart attack after a leadoff single, but didn't allow anything else to happen. Earlier on in the game, this is what I was talking about, if you could believe it, but the man who actually single-handedly led the Yankees to victory was DJ LeMahieu with this. And this audio, by the way, like the last one with Jazz Chisholm, I don't know if I forgot to mention it, but it is obviously in courtesy of the Yes Network. Listen to what happened with the bases loaded against all expectations.
Driven into left center field. Going back is Hayes. Turning, looking. And that's going to be off the wall. 3 runs will score. They say it's a double right now. And LeMahieu gets a big hit. The Yankees have a 3-0 lead.
And I think the outfielders thought it was a home run.
I think LeMahieu did as well.
Yeah,
that's gone. That's a grand slam.
Bet your ass it's a grand slam. My God, did anybody expect that? So that made it 4-0 off the bat of DJ. And then when the Phillies crept a little bit closer, made it 4-3. DJ again with a 2-run double. Made it 6-3. And the final score ended up being 6-5 Yankees win after the Phillies tried to crawl back a little bit off of Leiter Jr., but then after he worked himself into some trouble, he worked himself out of it as well. And the final score, ultimately, was DJ 6, Phillies 5. And the Yankees unbelievably completed the sweep on the road to also seal up what was a 5-1 road trip. I have mentioned that the Yankees have done well on the road, but my God, what a big statement on what was looking to be a tough road trip after they had gotten embarrassed once again by the Mets and then split a series that they should have won at home against the Rays to come right back after the All-Star break. What a statement to make on the road trip. And also to ultimately win this weekend's series 2 out of 3 against the Blue Jays. So jumping to that after the very successful road trip, the Blue Jays came to town on Friday night, and this is what I was alluding to earlier when it comes to the one and only loss the Yankees had this weekend. It was mainly because of Marcus Stroman, who continues to fall apart at the seams. And I mentioned in the past weeks that he has just been very weirdly off of late. I mean, he's had the tendency in the past to fall off in the second half, whether it be injury-related or otherwise, but he's just tended to not have as easy of second halves in the past. And that's taking form now, unfortunately, for him as well. Because, as I mentioned earlier, in his last 10-11 starts, he has had only one quality outing. His total numbers now are 7-6 after he actually started the season racking up a decent amount of wins in a row. Now it's 7-6, and his ERA is over 4 after how nice it was prior. In his last 7 starts, he is 1-3, and his ERA is 6.82. Even in his last 15, 5-5 ERA of 4.5. But especially in these last 7 to 10 games or so, Marcus has been nothing short of brutal, honestly. Even in this outing, 2 2/3, 8 hits, 7 runs, 2 of those coming with the runners that were on base with his responsibility that Tonkin allowed to score. But still, just a horrible outing. 1 walk, 3 strikeouts, ERA just going up and up and up and up. Let me tell you something. Marcus Stroman is a very important part, like I mentioned with certain other guys like Anthony Volpe, very important part, especially this rotation in particular, when it comes to what they hope to achieve here. He's too important to them to let this continue this way, so they got to figure this out with him. They have got to figure this out. Got to sit down with him off the field and try to figure out what's mechanically going wrong, if it's maybe a bit of a mental thing. Regardless of what it is, he has been a problem that has to be steered in a better direction, because this can't continue this way. Again, not the first second half collapse we will have witnessed from him, injury-related or otherwise, but they got to figure it out. Have to figure it out. Cannot go on this way with Marcus Stroman. He's too important. So needless to say that mainly thanks to him, the Yankees were fairly buried pretty early on, but they tried to make an offensive comeback at one point. I mean, they tried to when they were down 3-0 as well. Judge hit his 40th home run of the year to make it 3-2. But then they just added on even more off of Marcus after that. Yankees ultimately found themselves down 7-2 by the time the 3rd inning had come and gone. So again, just early burying. But then in the bottom of the 5th is when the Yankees tried to crawl back again. A 2-run shot by Volpe, another home run for him, and then an RBI single for Austin Wells to follow made it 7-5. They crept back in a little bit, but the offense couldn't get anything going after that, and the deficit proved to be too much as the Blue Jays added on even one more after that and won 8-5. So this one was on Marcus, definitely. Offense did what they could. Another game of scoring at least 5 runs with the consecutive streak I mentioned earlier in the show, with 8 consecutive games of doing at least that. But too many runs. Too many runs given up. Fortunately, the rest of the weekend, despite today being chaotic, went very well. They were the ones to score 8 runs, were the Yankees yesterday. Thanks to, despite the Blue Jays getting off to a good start off of a solo shot for Vlad Guerrero Jr. off of Rodon, who would later settle down, Aaron Judge got things started right away in the bottom of the 1st with a 2-run shot, his 41st of the year already to make it 2-1. After that, even the Blue Jays yesterday and then for most of today intentionally walking him 3 times. They just wanted nothing to do with him anymore. He was the first player this season to be intentionally walked with nobody out and no one on base. Talk about a team that just wants nothing to do with a certain player anymore. My God, is that funny or what? He's really approaching truly Barry Bonds level now as far as that. The respect levels are just going up and up. I mean, it sucks because he gets opportunities to hit taken away from him, less and less opportunity to hit more home runs, but the respect is there, that's for sure. You can't question that. Bottom of the 2nd, Trent Grisham, as I mentioned earlier before, 2-run shot, roped one almost into the bleachers. His 7th of the year made it 4-1. Volpe, another home run for him, his 11th of the year and 3rd one this past week. And another 2-run shot for the Yanks, 3rd one yesterday afternoon alone, made it 6-1. After the Blue Jays scored a couple more to inch a little bit closer on a 2-run single by Kirk, Volpe added on another run with an RBI single as his hot streak continued, and Wells would get the 8th run of the game on an RBI single and seal the deal at 8-3, with Carlos Rodon also, as I mentioned earlier, having his 3rd consecutive solid start as his comeback thankfully continues. I want to talk about another person very important in what the Yankees are trying to do. Thank God. No matter how many times I called him a bum for the extreme struggling for so many starts in a row. My God in heaven. Just thankfully he's bouncing back. My God. His Yankee career has been probably more turbulent and frustrating overall than just about any other pitcher they've signed in recent memory almost within the last 20 to 30 years. But had another respectable outing this time. 5 1/3, 3 runs allowed, 2 walks, and 8 strikeouts. And those other 2 runs at the end of his outing were charged to him when Jake Cousins came into the game because they would end up scoring off of Cousins, but they were Rodon's responsibility. But Rodon, I respected the grittiness in this, and this is the attitude that I had been longing from him for so long. To end the game, he was over 100 pitches, and he wanted to try to get Vlad out to try to finish off the inning. And he gave him 100 miles per hour when he was over 100 pitches, up and away, and Vlad Guerrero, who is hitting out of his mind for weeks now, by the way. Hitting streak approaching 20 now. But he's just been out of his mind and unstoppable, almost no matter who is facing him on any team. But Rodon really gave it his all in that at-bat and gave him as good a pitch as you could give a right-handed hitter as a left-handed pitcher. And he just took it to right field. I mean, there's nothing you could do with that, but I respect the grittiness, but unfortunately those 2 runs scored after he left, charged to him. But still, respectable outing by Rodon. Bullpen held it down. Yankees won 8-3. Rubber game matchup today, getting the start this afternoon, was Garrett Cole. He scuffled a little bit in the second inning, sort of just gave up a hit parade one after the other, to be honest. But then other than that, he settled down to follow that, ended up finishing the start having gone 5 2/3 with 6 hits, just 2 runs. Didn't walk anybody, that's good. And struck out 4, so ultimately settled in and had a respectable outing. The bullpen did their thing after that. The only reason the Blue Jays were able to notch out 1 more run off of Tommy Kahnle a little bit later was because of what I mentioned earlier on in the show, with Trent Grisham dropping that ball in left center field. That error did come back to bite them. But before that, the Yankees had crept back in, with Trent driving in a run on a ground ball himself, and then DJ LeMahieu hitting a sacrifice fly to tie the game, both of those in the 6th inning. Juan Soto would put them ahead 3-2 with his 28th home run of the year to left center field. I tell you, off a left-handed pitcher to left center field, Oppo Taco, Soto's just incredible. He really is. And after the error, the Blue Jays retying at 3, and despite the Yankees' epic comeback with an error then allowing the Blue Jays to come back, they would head to extra innings, with ultimately in the bottom of the 10th after a gutsy top of the 10th by Mark Leiter Jr. DJ would come up after Trent Grisham successfully bunted Volpe over to third, the ghost runner. DJ LeMahieu, despite having 5 infielders coming in to guard the infield against ground balls, which DJ does quite often, mind you, he has actually successfully lifted the ball a lot more as of the last week, as we have spoken about. This time he did hit it on the ground, but in a good spot where nobody was, none of the 5 infielders were, resulting in this.
And he does. Ball game over. Yankees win 4-3. DJ LeMahieu walks it off with a single, and the Yankees take the series 2-1.
That's what I'm talking about, baby. That's what I'm talking about. Yankees take another series. Beat the Blue Jays 4-3, head into the off day on a high note. Like I said, good past week of Yankees baseball, guys. Good past week. What's up ahead this coming week? As I mentioned earlier, they're off tomorrow on Monday, so another nice Monday off day to recollect themselves and reset things. Tuesday, they welcome the Angels into town for a 3-game set. Tuesday night's game, the 6th, will be at 7:05 Eastern at the stadium as the homestand continues. Luis Gil will be taking the mound. The game will be on Yes. 7:05 Eastern again for Wednesday the 7th against the Angels. Cortez will be on the mound that night, back to Wednesday night Prime once again. So Amazon Prime Video, broadcasting note for you Yankee fans out there, for my fellow fans. Thursday the 8th will also be at 7:05, so all 3 games at 7:05. Stroman will be taking the mound again. We'll see if he could finally freaking bounce back for once. He really needs a good start. Angels a bit of an easier team to face. We'll see if he could get in a better way with that. That game will also be on the S Network. Friday, the Yankees remain home to continue their extended homestand to welcome the Texas Rangers to town Friday the 9th. This game will be at 7:05 Eastern as well. No pitching matchups announced for any of these 3 games in the Bronx next weekend. Saturday the 10th will be at 1:05 Eastern. And Sunday the 11th, when we shall yap again, that game will be at 1:35 Eastern Standard Time. And that is what is ahead for the next week of Yankees baseball, my friends. So with that being said, another successful weekly recap wrapped up. For the first time in a month and a half, it was a positive one. Wasn't that nice? So let us finish up this Yapping Yankees edition, episode 229, with the social media segment for today, an open-ended question. And the question I did have for you, as you could probably imagine with the trade deadline having passed just this past Tuesday, was what grade would you give the Yankees trade deadline? And, sort of a 1B portion of the question, how much do you think it improved their chances to do even better than they otherwise would have? Well, me personally, I'm not going to repeat all my thoughts that I gave earlier on. Listen back to the Yankees news section where I gave my thoughts and the overall of what happened for the trade deadline with the Yankees if you want my reasoning for this. But after all of that having been said, my ultimate rating for the trade deadline for the Yankees is a C, for all the reasons I gave earlier on in the show. Again, don't want to repeat myself. And I do think it improves it a bit. I do think it definitely improves it a bit. Jazz Chisholm is definitely an upgrade over much of what they have had in the infield this season. And I do think that Leiter and De Los Santos add a strikeout element that was needed to the bullpen. While I do think there were bigger names out there, regardless of how unfair and out of control the market was, especially for the pitchers, were bigger names out there, and there still are a couple of potential holes with the team that I felt could have also been filled. So with that being said, let's hear your thoughts on it. Fire through some really quick. First up, we have at RMNY1976 saying C. They needed another starting pitcher and another pen arm. Should have moved Torres so Jazz plays second and gotten them a third baseman. Team still has too many problems. Well, that's nearly identical to my thoughts, my friend. Yeah, it's definitely fine to admit that Jazz was a good move with defense overall and versatility and even at the plate, especially with what we've seen since he's gotten here. But, you'd like to move him to second base and finally just get rid of Glaber if possible, just sit him down and get a third baseman like Diaz to help improve that corner side of the infield and get someone who has third base experience. And maybe add another bullpen arm as well, yeah. Absolutely. Maybe even get another starter. But again, the good news is, and this isn't to make an excuse for the deadline, but it is the truth, at least the Yankees do have some internal options coming back or already back and just finishing up their build-up for some of these aspects. Like I said, they do have Birdie and Efros building up in the minor leagues for the bullpen. They do have Clark on his way back doing bullpen sessions and whatnot. And another name, too, for the bullpen that's on his way back, scheduled to do a high-intensity bullpen session in a couple of days, is Ian Hamilton, too. I know he hasn't been too trustworthy because he's missed a lot of time this year due to injury. But you have guys like that on their way back, even for potential infield versatility if you end up needing him at any point. Going forward, you also have John Birdie working his way back. He's apparently at 80%. Recovering from a setback that he had some weeks ago. You have Poteet as sort of that backup option that you can use if you're in absolute need of him. And for the lineup also, I would say at this point, if you absolutely need him, I think Jason Dominguez should be ready to go at some point this week, if not already now, whenever you need him to. So there are internal options, as I said last week, even if not as many trade deadline moves are made to help externally. There are some internal options coming back or even already close to ready to go, if not already all set to go. Again, not to excuse not as much being done at the deadline. It's not for that. But you have some options that you could look to hopefully somewhat make up for the fact that maybe some more moves could have been made. Maybe. Because there are still a couple of those holes to be filled, like you say. At the Rick4444 says, at first I would say F. However, since Chisholm is playing out of his mind right now, I'll say C-. That's being nice because we really needed relief pitching. The inability to get what we needed is indicative of the lack of player development by Cashman. Injuries are an excuse. Yeah, fair enough. I wouldn't give it an F because I still think Jazz is at least a decent addition. Again, you don't expect him to play out of his mind the way he has in the first week, but you expect him to be a pretty solid piece still. And even if they're not the big names or necessarily as sexy of options as other big names out there on the market, they did get a couple of respectable higher strikeout guys than they had in the bullpen prior. So I don't think they deserve as much as an F, but I definitely don't think they deserve anything as high as a B or higher either. So that's where I sit around a C. But there are definitely still other things that need to happen. And you hope that the internal options that are coming back from injury or perhaps even ready to go can also help fill those going forward, because now you got what you got. The deadline's over. So, that's all. Rebecca at Peace Now for Life says, I say a B. Jazz has been very good addition, great energy, and has been very good at third base, and he's versatile. Leiter Jr. definitely improves the length of the bullpen, really needed another starter, though, and could have used one more bat. Yeah, very similar thoughts. Instead, I would just bump that B down to a C because of those extra needs that I consider to be pretty vital. But, Yandy Diaz would have been nice, both offensively and being experienced at third base. At the corner, where you could move Jazz to second. Use him in the outfield if you absolutely need, but mainly just stick him to his position where he's comfortable at second base. And just to hell with Glaber. Just enough already. I don't want to keep repeating myself. Made my thoughts on him more than clear to this point. But yeah, another starter would have been nice. I'm hoping Clark is on the money for the most part, at least when he returns. He has missed some time, and you hope he's just fresh for the rest of the way out and can provide some much-needed boosting to the lower parts of the rotation that are in need of that. like Marcus Stroman and Nestor Cortez slipping of late. The other three, you just hope continue on a good path. You hope Cole continues to find himself and build on this good start once again here today. You hope Luis Gil maintains, which he has very well. And Carlos Rodon continues to work his way back as he has for the last 3 consecutive starts. And you have Clark doing well coming back. Then got yourself a decent bunch of pitchers there again. But yeah, definitely an external pitcher would have been nice. I know Flaherty and Crochet was someone that a lot of people were talking about as well. But Crochet had a weird thing at the deadline. What was that? He was mentioning something about wanting an extension before agreeing to pitch in the playoffs for a contender. Like, what the hell? What kind of stipulation is that? I mean, it's clear that a lot of teams were baffled or maybe even disgusted by that because Bro didn't end up being moved the way that people had anticipated. Just a weird situation there. But yeah, I agree, Rebecca. Another bat, like I said, would have been nice, and another relief pitcher and or starter certainly would have been nice. But listen, we'll see what they do with the internal options now that the deadline is passed. At Great Hambino 28 says C, very average. They got a couple of arms. Jazz seems like a good move, but that wasn't enough. They really needed a true first base / third baseman and at least one front of the line bullpen arm or starting pitcher, and they didn't really get any of them. Yeah, regardless of how out of control the market was, especially for pitchers, as I said, yeah, that's how I feel in that latter part. The couple of arms are definitely pretty solid, and Jazz is a good move. That's what I said. But a true corner infielder, that's why Yandy Diaz, primarily first and third baseman, that was the guy I wanted towards the end there when certain other names were off the list, and that was the guy I was looking at, but it just never happened. And maybe that one more bullpen guy, one more starter, yeah, but again, it's past now, and I definitely agree with your letter grade. Obviously, that's exactly what I would say, more or less. You really echoed a lot of my thoughts that I had already said. We'll see what they do with the internal options. At Mike B_923 says B-. Jazz was a good pickup. Leiter Jr. has struggled a little bit occasionally in pinstripes, but I think he'll be just fine. However, I still feel they needed to get another starting pitcher, even with Clark Schmidt making his way back. Yeah, getting a starter on top of Clark coming back definitely would have solidified the rotation even more, especially if it's a guy like Jack Flaherty, so I'm inclined to agree with you there, Mike, no doubt. But Leiter Jr. has been mostly fine. He's gotten some trouble in Philadelphia that he ended up working out of and made sure the Phillies didn't fully complete their comeback, so you could live with that. But then in today's game, he proved that he was nails again. Just in the face of pressure, the guy remains cerebral, at least as of today, so you love to see that. But, I mean, fair enough, yeah. You acknowledge the pickups that they had, but you fantasize about others. At Rebirth Chaos 09, my buddy James says C. I think Jazz and Mark Leiter Jr. will help. Still feel like we could have used another starter. Nestor and Stroman haven't pitched well lately, but I can understand why they couldn't. The market was insane, especially what teams got, so I get why the Yankees did what they did. Yeah, and yes, you can validly make the argument that you have to throw all in this year because it could possibly be the only year with Soto and whatnot. There's got to be the year you go all in and put all your chips on the table. I get it. But yeah, also the market was objectively insane because while you want the Yankees to go all in and maybe even make some irrational moves, some of the fleecing that did take place, even for some objectively mid pitchers, was, again, at the risk of repeating myself, objectively nuts. It was bonkers. So I understand to a degree. I do. But the frustration's still there. And you felt more could have been done. You fantasized about other moves. But you also acknowledge what they got individually was not bad at all. So you landed a C. So a lot of people seem to understand me here and even agree. At Mountain Gal 456, my buddy Tina says, wish they could have gotten another starting pitcher. I'm a little sentimental about Glaber because he's been with us so long, but something needs to change there. Let's face it, when they win with what they have gotten, they look good. When they lose, it looks like they need more. Well, yeah, that's the way with most teams. Absolutely. The ugliness is exposed amidst losing, and then winning masks certain things. That's how it always is. But, yeah, I'm not sentimental about Glaber at all. As a matter of fact, the amount of time he's been there frustrates me even more, because this past week just proved even further to me that regardless of his now veteran status, the rookie young excuse no longer works when you're within the league as long as he has been. And you would hope to see some growth in that time, which most players do, and you make mistakes in life so that you learn from them. But we've seen the same damn things happen with them for almost damn near a decade now. You make mistakes in life so you learn from them, and Glaber has not learned. So as a matter of fact, the fact that he has been here for long and still does the stupid crap that he does. And even when he does something good, a lot of the time he finds a way to immediately undo it. That actually makes me even more frustrated. The point of him being here for some time now, so not sentimental at all regarding that. Makes me even more frustrated. But yeah, absolutely. You wish that a little bit more could have happened for sure. Sounds like you landed around the same grade as me, Tina. At Dr. Guzman says, C. Gun shy on Flaherty injury. Big mistake. Relatively cheap pickup was worth the perceived risk. Yeah, Flaherty would have been nice. I have said that. He would have been nice. And again, it just really rubs me the wrong way. The fact that Trey Sweeney was used in the return for that. Oh, God, that really made me nuts. Oh, boy. At Joe Yankee, though, says there's two ways to look at it. One is that they didn't do enough. Still need a first baseman and a better reliever than DeSantos. Also, I wanted Flaherty. The other is that this deadline was weird and not many players were moved. So, out of all that were available, the Yankees did better than practically every other team. They got most of what they needed, and they have starters and relievers coming back from injury. Wish we got Yandy Diaz, though. But then again, no one got Yandy. Those are basically my thoughts exactly. What I've been saying the entire show, that's pretty much it. Completely agree with you, Joe. Totally. At Stevie6261 says, considering the limited number of players on the trading block, I would probably say B- to C+. They really needed to improve to swing and miss relievers. Don't know if that has happened. Jazz being versatile has definitely improved the team. Yeah, individually, solid pickups. And you have seen the strikeout stuff from Leiter. He's gotten some big strikeouts and big moments with Leiter Jr. And Dos Santos, I think it'll be a decent pickup. I think Leiter Jr. will have more of an impact than him. But I don't think he's a bad pickup. It's a sensible reply, though. Makes sense. At DB Yankees 1 says, C. I like Chisholm, but they failed to get a badly needed starting pitcher. Not sure the rotation's good enough to win in the postseason. Well, we've seen plenty of teams in the playoffs win with just like 3 solid pitchers. So if Cole by the playoffs is himself, and again an if because it's been a weird year for him, and you have Luis Heel maintaining if he's not moved back to the bullpen at some point or limited. I mean, we'll see what happens with Heel. It's very interesting. And then you have 2 other options. I mean, Rodon's a huge wild card because you never know. He's either this year he's been amongst the best or he's been amongst the worst. And then you have Clark Schmidt returning. Hopefully he builds back up to being what he was for the vast majority of the season right up until he got hurt. He was great this year. Definitely took a solid next step forward in his Major League Baseball starting pitching career. Talking about 3 guys right there, at least maybe even 4. And that could do it because you usually run with a 4-man anyway at that point. But I've seen teams win with 3. So we'll see. The last time in the playoffs, the Yankees' problem was the hitting. And I happen to think the lineup is much better, especially at full health, particularly. Especially when you add Jason Dominguez into the mix whenever he gets here, ultimately. Whenever they bring him up, I should say. But I agree with the letter grade. Definitely. All right, let's just read a couple more, because it's getting late early once again, as it always does. Let's see here. Spencer, my good buddy Spencer at Musician DMD. Hope you're still doing good, my friend, and on the track to fully healed eyesight, God willing. Spencer says, in asking, did the Yankees fall short of, meet, or exceeded their expectations at the deadline? I would decree the Yankees exceeded expectations. They acquired Jazz, a great player, for very little in return. Leiter Jr. increases the value of getting Jazz. I felt the Yankees had more problems than any number of trades could remedy. However, it seems that the team has improved quite coincidentally since acquiring Jazz. I feel they will play well for the rest of the season. Again, they exceeded expectations. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, Jazz and Leiter Jr. are definitely the main stories of the deadline, that's for sure. But I do still feel that they had a bit more problems than they could have addressed, especially with the market being insane for pitching in particular. But, again, like a lot of people have mentioned, not to sound like Cashman with the stupid isms and the ridiculous reasoning and excuses, but they do have some internal options that could also help going forward. That's just the objective truth. So we'll see, because it is what it is at this point. Deadline's gone. See what happens. Final two, as always. First up, my lovely girlfriend at Vic Salimo. She says, I'll give them a C, because while I like the spark that Chisholm and Leiter Jr. are providing for the team, I do think there were some bigger names out there overall that the Yankees really could have used. But I'm not necessarily mad either. Yeah, simply stated, well put, agreeable. I agree, definitely well said. The pickups have been good so far. Last but certainly not least is my mom, Julia Gina Scudero, and she says, hi, Mike. Hey, Mom. Let's see. I'll give them a C- because they definitely did not do enough for our pitching. We needed a starter and a reliever badly, in my opinion. I do happen to like Leiter Jr. a lot, and I love Jazz Chisholm and his energy and ability that he has. Loved watching him so far, having so much fun. They needed to make more of an effort in the bullpen, even if the ones they made seemed beneficial. All in all, I can't believe this win today either. DJ saved us with that walk-off. When's the last time we could say that? Let's go Yankees. Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to DJ, my goodness. Completely, Mom. Unexpected, but not unwelcomed. That's what I say. And my fellow Star Wars fans should understand this one. Chancellor Palpatine saying, a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. That definitely falls under that category. But yeah, you do feel a couple of other names out there, especially with the pitching, whether it be starting or relieving, that could have also helped things along. And I also add a corner infielder into that. But yeah, the pickups that they do have are beneficial. You're right. So it's a little bit of everything and has you landing a bit in the middle. So I think that's why a lot of us landed in the arena of a C, and I would think that that is fair. But I thank all of you for interacting with the social media segment as always, guys. Another great discussion in there. I love you guys interacting. Always some great thoughts thrown around, no matter what the topic happens to be with the Yankees. So another great week of that. Thank you all for interacting. I really appreciate that. And if you've happened to made it to the end of yet another long episode today, here on episode 229, I thank you for that as well. Very much from the bottom of my heart, because listening to me talk for almost 2 hours straight cannot be easy. But that is all for episode 229 of Yapping Yankees after all. Remember to follow me on all social medias, guys, as I always say every week if you have not already. My Facebook fan page is at Mike Scudero NY. My Twitter or X is at Mike Scudero. And my Instagram is Mike Scuds97. Please be sure to subscribe to Yapping Yankees on all 4 of the platforms it is available on. That is YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Like, subscribe, comment, show your love across any or all of the 4 platforms like you all do such a great job at always doing, my friends. And if you've missed any past episodes of Yapping Yankees, do not worry. Episodes 34 up to today's episode 229, are all available on YouTube, and every Yapping Yankees episode going back to episode 1 up to today, every episode that has ever been in the last 5+ years of Yapping Yankees, they can all be found on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. But once again, I thank you 3,000 for listening to me yap today. As always, my good people, I have been your host, Mike Scudero, and we shall yap again next Sunday, August the 11th, when I come at you with episode 230, if you could believe it, of Yapping Yankees. But until then, guys, as I always say, hang in there, be patient, especially with me as of late. Please stay safe. Look out for your loved ones. Go ahead and kick life's ass this week, my friends, no matter what is thrown in your path. And let's just hope that, especially following the deadline, their newest additions, their injury comebacks, and all the like, that the Yankees continue on the path that they have been since last weekend in Boston. Let's continue on this good path. Team's in a good way right now. Things are getting better and better. Schedule's easing up. Let's keep rolling, baby. All that and the fact that I'm also healing from my car accident injuries as well, as is my girlfriend, which also leads me to remind me to thank all of you for your continued concern on that and constantly checking in. A lot of you have been doing that out there. I have not missed a single message of yours, even if I have not gotten to answer you as of yet, if I haven't already. But it means the world, guys, as I've said. So we're continuing to be on a good path from that. The Yankees are on a good path. Life is on a better trend finally amidst this beyond chaotic summer. God. But regardless, I look very forward to doing it all again with you next Sunday, my friends. Until then, take care, and let's go Yanks.